And so, if we're going to do that, we have to do what you are committed to doing here, and that is we have to build equity leaders. And we all have to become equity leaders. And when I think about what it's going to take, there are a few things that I think are important. One is, you certainly get this, you have to lead with equity. Leading with equity is the only way to get equity. But the good part about leading with equity is when you lead in a way that you solve the problems for those who are the most vulnerable, you solve them for everybody. The example that I use that is also familiar to all of us is when you're moving around town and you see those cutouts in the sidewalk. Those cutouts are there because of the advocacy of people with disabilities who needed to be able to maneuver. They had the disability rights, they had achieved them legally to be able to get jobs, to be able to have access. But if you didn't have these cutouts, those laws, that legal ability would be really quite hollow. Well, how many of you, when pushing a stroller, have been so happy that that cutout was there? How many workers pulling a wagon or pushing a cart have had their labor easier because that cutout was there? How many times have people like me carrying that suitcase, I sometimes think it's attached to me, just pulling that suitcase behind me, easier to get around because the cutout was there? And how many parents have had peace of mind because their young bikers who were out were able to traverse the city going from sidewalk to sidewalk rather than being in the street because those cutouts were there? When you solve problems effectively for those who are most vulnerable in society, you actually solve them for everyone. And so, lead with equity. The second is make sure that all the institutions become champions for equity. We don't achieve equity if only advocacy groups are doing it. The schools, the hospitals, the healthcare systems, the businesses, they all have to become champions for equity. So we have to help everybody who's in our midst understand this. We have to figure out ways to target resources to the highest need areas, whether that's students or families or communities, so that we are focusing our resources where they need to be. We have to all be leaders for equity with the basics. You know, sometimes we're dealing with higher education or we're dealing in some other area. We have to focus on food. We have to focus on health. We have to focus on training programs. We have to lead for the basics with equity. And the last, and I think the most important, is when you are an equity leader, you don't celebrate success unless you're making progress on your equity goals. How many times have we said we're about equity and we do something and it looks pretty good to us and we try to celebrate what we're doing and say, oh yeah, and we're going to get to the equity thing next year. We'll get that to next month. We're going to put together a special committee to understand why we didn't achieve the equity goals, but aren't we happy about everything else we did? If you're about equity, you don't celebrate success unless you're making progress on your equity goals. And so I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you because you're in the conversation that we all have to be in. You are at the cutting edge. The country doesn't know it yet, but you are laying the groundwork for the nation to thrive. It is shocking to me that more people don't recognize this, and it is shocking to me that as we try to tell people, people put up a wall and they don't want to hear it. Because we can do this. I always say local leaders are national leaders because they are solving the nation's problems. And that is what you are doing right here. Thank you.